So hey everyone, it's Bond here from Dr. Pennsylvania, and I'm sitting in our little makeshift studio with Nick.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
What's going on?
So I literally
Creaky chairs.
Yeah, you guys are gonna hear a lot of creaky chairs.
And I'll say real quick that this is one of these impromptu, unscripted things. So if we ramble on more than usual, that's probably the reason why. Also, I have something like a sore throat, which is what's responsible for my sounding better than I normally do right now.
Gives that husky baritone.
That's right. Is that doing anything for you?
Yeah, without all the
How about I undo this button?
Yeah, with all the after effects. So you guys are going to be hearing this on the 24th probably. It was on the 12th. I just got done editing the episode that you guys heard on the 17th, which was the Murder Swamp. Well, the Torso Killers. Killers. It's
possible.
It's debatable. But so that was a rough episode to edit, as Nick had a rough time researching it because of just how graphic and gruesome it was. So we felt like we needed to have like a lighthearted, fun episode to follow that up, I think.
And one of the things we do for fun is we do a lot of fly fishing, and we thought, how can we possibly make an excuse to talk about fishing? And we thought, well, fly fishing is kind of a big deal in PA. It's got a long history in PA, and our state fish is actually the brook trout, which is a trophy fish.
It is, yeah. And like fly fishing and fishing in general goes back a long, long time in Pennsylvania. And we will at some point do a history of fly fishing in PA episode.
Might get some help. Bond's uncle is actually a guide.
Yes, he is. And I plan on tapping him for some resources. Between me and Nick, we have some older books that we'll get some information from. But we want to compile, I think, a good timeline.
Yeah. But the bottom line is a couple weeks ago we were talking about how can we get down together in front of a mic and do something where there's not a lot of research involved for us, and just kind of an easier thing, but do a longer sort of thing. And I thought about kind of talking about the first time we caught a fish on a fly. Because a lot of us, most people around here, I feel like, have been fishing at least once or twice when they're little kids. But, as you get older, you take your fun kind of seriously. And the funny thing about it is, and I'll talk about my first time later, but my first time was a tiny fish, and it scared the hell out of me. And, so we kind of thought it'd be kind of neat to share that. And it would give us the ability to talk about places in Pennsylvania that we love, a thing that we love doing that has deep connection to Pennsylvania, and kind of go from there. So, Brendan, unless you got anything else to kind of ramble about right now, tell us about that first time, and where were you? When were you?
Yeah, so I like many fly fishermen that we talked to, started off, like you said, gear fishing whenever I was younger. And didn't really transition to fly fishing until a few years ago. And I was drawn to it for a number of reasons. I think one was just kind of like the absurdity of it. Because if you want to catch a fish, the easiest thing to do is to throw a net in the water.
Right.
Second easiest thing is to put, a night crawler on a treble hook and plop it in there.
Something that smells and
exactly,
something that moves on its own.
But even before I knew what was what, I liked the idea of there being some sort of like an aesthetic to it. The idea that you could do an outdoor sport like that had some kind of like artfulness to it was really attractive to me. So my first rod was a LLB in Clearwater. Might not be called Clearwater. Whatever their entry.
The bottom line is you're going out there with really basic
basic.
You got a basic rod. You had like hip thigh waders on that Walmart.
Yes. Yeah, it was very rudimentary gear from what most fly fishermen will typically go out.
And you went your first time not too far from here. We're sitting in our fiddle shop right now. down in Harmony, PA. You were am I right in saying you were up at McConnell's Mill?
Yes, I was up at McConnell's Mills, which is a smaller state park here in western Pennsylvania. It only covers about, I think, like 2,500 acres, which, like, compared to Moraine or Goddard, some of those other places around here, is relatively small. But it's a very geographically interesting.
Yeah, it's got
place.
It's got Lawrence County's covered bridge in there. I know we put a picture up.
Yeah.
I took a picture from the mill. There's an old grist mill there that was in operation for a number of years. There's obviously a ghost stories associated with that mill and with that bridge, and that let's make sure we remember to talk about that in the near future.
Yeah.
But the Slippery Rock Creek runs through there,
Yes.
and when it's there, it's more of a river, really.
It really is, because it's only I'd say maybe 50, 60 feet wide at most spots, but it's very deep and very, I think we mentioned this before, it's a treacherous.
Yeah, I forget which episode, but I know I've stated that the Slippery Rock Creek, every year, a couple of people, almost every year like clockwork, a couple people drown in there.
Yeah, because it doesn't look like crazy water until unfortunately you're in it.
And right there by the mill as well. It's very in that surrounding area. You're in this holler, and it's very shady, and the water is a really verdant green color.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's absolutely
It
it's
is.
absolutely gorgeous. And where I was at was I'd say about maybe a quarter mile up from the mill, like upstream. So towards like the Frew Mill area.
Moving towards, if you're looking at a map, Brendan would be moving towards Route 422.
Towards 422, in like the Rose Point area. But so I'm up there, and like I have caught like bluegill and sunfish and stuff on a fly here at the Connoquenessing at this point, but I've yet to actually catch like a real fish, as we say sometimes. And I have our buddy Matt with us, who helps us out a lot with stuff and does fishing. And Matt was with me, and we went down this really heavy, like steep, rocky, like cliff face, basically. Like whenever you have to kind of like slide down, like you can't actually walk down it. Like that's kind of what this was. But we saw like an eddy and like a bend pool that we were like, if I was a fish. If I was a fish in the Slippery Rock Creek waiting for little goodies to trickle down to me, that's where I'd be sitting.
Right, because trout are they're opportunistic, and they do kind of, they're not a fish that goes swimming around hunting for stuff. They kind of more or less wait for things to come to them.
They really do. So the place looked good, and so we went down there, and I tied on a Royal Coachman.
Which, in the annals of like fly fishing, the Royal Coachman is kind of like, I'm trying to think. It's like the K car. Like it's not in the way that the Coachman is a flashy looking thing, but it's just something that like you see everywhere. Yeah. Like every fly shop has that fly.
If you're watching a movie and someone has a fly on their hat, it's probably a Coachman.
Right. If you're watching a river runs through it,
they're throwing lots of Coachmen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's in a Coachman.
I don't actually know if that is true. I don't know if I've ever watched that movie, but
no, they absolutely were, I think.
Okay. I do know we had to learn the soundtrack for it to play a wedding once.
We did. But a Coachman is actually, which I'm sure we'll cover in our forthcoming episode on the history of fly fishing in Pennsylvania, a Coachman is a type of bucktail, which is now like the world over with fly fishing, people use bucktails. They were developed in Pennsylvania.
I did not know that, actually.
Yeah. Like anytime you see those little streamers that have just a little bit of hackle on them coming back.
Yeah.
Like, and not a whole lot else.
You should probably say what hackle is.
Again, we'll leave that for the other episode. So, but anyone who's out there who doesn't know what a Coachman is, don't worry. It's a
Google it.
Whatever you're thinking of, that's probably what it looks like. Anywho, so I throw a Coachman, which is a reasonable choice, but if I was fishing it today, that's not what I would fish. But anyway, so I'm casting out into the current letting it drift and letting it fall a little bit in the water column, and then aggressively stripping back to try and basically stimulate a strike from anything that's hiding in the rocks. And I'm there for 15, 20 minutes doing just about the same thing. And out of nowhere, I see this like orange like flash go like past where I think my coachman's at. And instead of delicately just kind of raising the rod tip a little bit to see if there's a fish on there, I basically bass strike it and like just rip the fly out of the water. It goes back. It's like in the trees now and everything. And it was very, very not graceful. But I'm like, okay, there's fish there. I'm like, that was a fish that I saw.
Right. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, logs do not move that quickly against the current, you know. So I get my fly line back in order. And after a few more casts in basically the same spot, I hook this brown trout. And like Matt was with me, so he can attest to this. I like lost it. Like I was not cool about it. You watch men and women nowadays catching like, you know, big salmon and stuff, and they're like they're like
no big thing.
They're like, yeah, it's like not a big deal. Like, oh, I'm just on the Kennebec, you know, like, or I'm just on the, you know. You would have thought that I hooked, you know, a kraken, a hydra, whatever, you know. I was hollering, I was just, you know, and by the time I realized I had this fish like securely hooked, like I realized I'm like, I don't know if I get the fly line on the backing, I don't know if I strip hook it, I'm like I don't know what to do now. I have this fish that I'm now just harassing, you know, basically. I'm like, if a warden comes by, he's gonna be like, what the hell are you doing with that poor fish?
Yeah.
So I eventually realized I can kind of like just strip the fly line and get him in, and like I was so scared I was gonna lose it. Like all I wanted to do was like handle this fish. That's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to say like I officially
put the stencil
trout.
On the
exactly,
car.
Yeah. So so it gets up close to us and everything, and Matt helped me to net it, and like we kept it in the water though, kind of thing. Like I made sure to like get my hands wet before like getting the hook out, like
right.
Because at that point I'd read how many books on fly fishing, so like I had at least an idea of what proper fish handling was to like, you know, cut down on fish mortality and not like hurt the fish anymore. But it was this nice little like 10, 11 inch brown. Like it was not a trophy fish by, you know, any real standards. But like I will never forget that fish. Like I was like, I don't want to use the pun that I was hooked, but like it was but like after I caught that fish, I was just like, well,
that was it for you.
Yeah, I was like, well, I know what I'm doing with my free time for the rest of time. You know?
And it's funny, I got into it in a different way. Yeah. I didn't fish a whole lot as a kid. I mean, I had a pond in the backyard, so it was always something to do. But I was more interested in catching frogs and turtles and snakes and things like that. My dad fished a lot, spin fishing, bait fishing predominantly, and it was just kind of boring to me pretty quickly. But I remember sitting down with our friend Aaron in his basement out in Ohio, and we were talking a long while about it. And I said, it's something I kind of want to get into. I knew that he was into it, and so we had made a plan. We had gone out once, and nothing happened that time. He pulled in a couple fish, but later on that same year, in early December, maybe even the last week in November, he and I went out on this gorgeously miserable day. It was, and this is kind of one of the things I like about fly fishing. It's an all-year thing on a lot of waters, and personally I take it as a matter of pride. I'll go out on, you know, days a lot of people aren't comfortable driving in, and so there we were. I met him around 7 in the morning, and we're on the water just outside of Oil City in Venango County. We're out in President is the name of the place, but it's nowhere. And we're on Porcupine, and we're on Hemlock, and it is just warm enough that it is raining really hard the whole time. I've got a wool sweater on. I'm very cold. I'm very wet, and we were out right as the sun came up till the sun was already down. We're still trying to find our way back to the car, but we left one of those Porcupine or Hemlock. I think we left Hemlock. I think that was the latter creek we went to. And we drove up north into Forest County along Route 666, whose signs get stolen quite frequently. And we took Route 62 north from President over to Route 666. And from there we cut across till we got to a little place called Minister Creek, where you can camp at Minister Creek. I think it's a state park as well. And a lot of hiking trails. There was a lumber camp there. It may have been even a small town at one point. And there is a dilapidated shack back there with some great graffiti, Reed Keats. And I think that was a sawmill, or at least part of it at one point. The bottom line is, it was once inhabited. It was part of the Pennsylvania lumber history. There was I think a narrow gauge rail ran back there at one point, and now I believe so. And that now constructs part of the trails that are used by a lot of hikers and campers and whatnot. But there was a very tiny stream, small water they call it, that runs through there, aptly named Minister Creek. And neither Aaron nor myself had caught anything up to that point. The day was miserable. He hadn't caught anything, and that's unlike him, because anytime we go out, he almost always pulls something. And towards the end of the day, we're working our way back downstream, back to where the car is parked. And he's helping me out because he's done. We're just kind of throwing things at the end of the day. And usually when it's really rainy out and the water's cloudy, you don't throw dry flies. In the world of fly fishing, there's really two types of flies, and everything is can be classified as one or the other. There are dry flies, which stay dry as they sit on top of the water. And then there are wet flies, which are submerged. This is your basic dichotomy. Now, again, it goes from there to streamers, the nymphs, the terrestrials, the hop. There's all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, they're either wet or dry. And usually, again, when it's miserable like this, when the water's cloudy, not good visibility, you're throwing big streamers, you're throwing wet flies. But it's not because I didn't know any better. It was just because I was just like, I'll throw whatever. I'm going to throw something different. I threw on I believe it was a caddis, which is a type of tiny, like, gnat-like thing. And I believe it was an elk hair caddis, which is made predominantly out of elk hair, believe it or not. And Aaron looks, and there's a bend in this tiny stream, and he goes, listen, throw the fly over here and let the line swing it out along the curve of that bank, because there's a little overhang here. So if there's any fish there, they're going to be protected. Again, it's very small water. So I looked at it, and I couldn't believe a fish could live in there. But I did what he said, and my fly went underwater right as it was finishing up that sweep of that bank there. And he goes, "Hey, pull it up. It's underwater. You got to keep it dry. You got to keep it on." But no sooner than he started to say that, than I got a fish on me, and it came to the surface, and it really did shock me. And that shock was partly because I wasn't expecting to see anything after being out for like 8-9 hours, miserable, wet, feeling awesome about it, but this fish really scared me, and I pulled it in, and it was like a little 5-6 inch brown trout. It was a lady trout.
It was a lady, yep.
It wasn't, and from the colors were really vibrant, so it was wild. Now, brown trout, despite what some people think, aren't native fish. They were brought here by European sportsmen predominantly in the 19th century, but there are wild brown trout in Pennsylvania. There are not native brown trout. And this one, by all outward appearances, was wild or had been at least a holdover from a previous stalking season. But actually, I don't know if Minister stalked, but I do know it runs into waters that are.
So it could have this fish in it.
Either way, it was very exciting. It was the only fish that was caught that day as well. Minister is up in northern Forest County, for which I do believe for a long time was the least populated county. I know it still doesn't have a stoplight in all the county, but
yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
Cameron County is now actually smaller population-wise.
Really?
I do know Forest County, like their children and youth system is connected with Warren County. It's kind of a joint thing because. But here's the funny thing: the first day of like deer season, because Forest County is located really in the heart of the Allegheny National Forest. I believe the county population hovers around 5,000 people, but the county population more than triples the first day of deer season.
Yeah, but I can absolutely believe it.
Bottom line was the first thing I pulled in was that Little Brown on Minister, and so I love going up there, not only because I have that memory, but also because I like small water, also because I'm walking around. Like, there were teamsters hauling out logs. There was all this. I'm walking around the ghosts of all these things.
There's history of these places, absolutely.
But then also with Minister, you walk back, and I've told you about it for years now, and you still haven't made it all the way back.
The Beaver Dam.
A gigantic beaver dam. Now, I don't know what state the beaver dam is in now. It's been a couple years, but I do know that the last time I was back there one summer, it was 3 tiers high, and I'm standing on it. I don't even turn my head, and I count like 6 neffs, which are like breeding ready salamanders. So it's a special place, and it's right up in the heart of Pennsylvania, like right on the cusp of Pennsylvania's northern tier, really on the line between Forest and Warren County, right there, just north of Route 666. Yeah, I think I had enough sixes in there, not too many.
No, but yeah, it's a wild place, and I mean. And I think you kind of hit on that, where a lot of the places that we fish, the places I think we like fishing the most, are the ones that do have that history along with them.
Well, we've talked about Pithole, which is Pithole is a famous ghost town during the oil boom. John Wilkes Booth lived there. I believe the Rockefellers had property there, or the Vanderbilts, one of those two prominent families. It was a crazy boom town. It had one of the busiest post offices in the New World, and within just a matter of years, it was gone.
It was like 4 or 5 years. It was something like really...
It was really... Like, they built a 3-story hotel in as many days, and the wood was all green, so when it dried out, there were huge gaps in the wall. There's these famous stories of these sort of things. There's a visitor center left. There's some foundations left, and there are 2 steps for an old church that I think they raised in the 30s or 40s. That was like the last remaining building, but there's Pithole Creek runs right through the property, and the homestead, I believe was the name, or Holden, something like that. It's slipping my mind at the moment. This is unscripted. Their family plot is there, and it's most easily accessible if you're wading through the creek. And I remember going back there with you, going back there with Aaron and Matt as well. A few times, and it's eerie because you think, like, this is the family whose farm became this crazy city for a few years, and now it's just back to just these remnants, and it's a wild thing. And so one of the things that does appeal to me about it is because you're on the water, because you have to push, you get to see sights that are otherwise fairly inaccessible.
Exactly.
Little things like that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, and that's again why I try and tell people why I preach about fly fishing so often, because it gets you out to the places that you might not normally go,
Yeah.
And like we say it jokingly, I think sometimes, to people, but a day out fly fishing is better than just about anything else.
Yeah, and this is certainly a lighter episode than talking about dismembered bodies and whatnot.
Yeah.
And
hopefully we'll never have to merge the two. Because we always joke about how we go all these places. It's only a matter of time before
we find something.
We find something we don't want to.
We end up on the set of Unsolved Mysteries.
Exactly. Yeah.
So.
But yes, and hopefully, knock on wood, that'll never be an issue. But. Yeah, this is a fun little episode.
And also, I'd like to say my friend Russ is going into surgery later this week. So,
oh, really? Wow.
Well, and by this week, I mean the time at which we're recording this. So I know he listens, so if he hears this, I hope he's doing all right. And
Yeah,
if he's
best
not
wishes.
listening, well, then I don't know what his problem is. But thanks for hanging out to the bitter end with us.
Yeah, absolutely, everyone. And as always, check us out on Facebook. Let us know what you think.
And if you have any cool pictures to share with us, like
Please
drop a
do.
line, let us know.
Yeah, and you can get a hold of us also at drpennsylvania@gmail.com. And have a good night.
Yeah, we'll talk to you then.